Sometimes the most broken hearts find each other in the darkest places. Sometimes a child's innocence can pierce through decades of hate and fear. In a frontier town, Apache warrior Tosa sits tied to a post, waiting for tomorrow's hanging. Everyone fears him. Everyone wants him dead. He's made peace with dying until 6-year-old Anna breaks from the crowd. This little girl has no mother, no family, nobody to love her. She walks right up to the man the whole town calls a monster. "Please, be my papa," she whispers. Those 4 words stop everything. The crowd goes silent. The sheriff freezes. And something changes in Tosa's eyes, something that looks like the pain of remembering his own lost child. One night, one little girl, one chance for a town to choose between revenge and redemption. What happens when an innocent child sees a father where everyone else sees an enemy? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 days earlier, the autumn sun had beaten down mercilessly on the rocky terrain outside Willow Creek when Sheriff Ben Hawkins first laid eyes on the Apache warrior they would come to call Tosa. The capture hadn't been planned, nothing about. Those violent, desperate minutes had gone according to anyone's design. Hawkins remembered the way the dust had settled around the fallen horse, how the warrior had struggled to free his leg from beneath the dying animal, and how his dark eyes had held no plea for mercy, only a resigned acceptance of whatever fate awaited him. Willow Creek stretched along the bend of a narrow river, its main street lined with weathered buildings that had seen too many seasons of fear. The town had grown from nothing more than a trading post 15 years ago, built by folks who believed they could carve out something decent from the harsh territory. They'd been wrong about the ease of it, but they'd been stubborn enough to stay anyway. Every family had buried someone's sons, fathers, brothers lost to the raids that came with the changing seasons. The Apache had taken plenty, but they'd lost plenty too, though the townspeople rarely thought of it that way. Ben Hawkins had been sheriff for 8 years, long enough to see the cycle of violence wear deep grooves in everyone's hearts. At 42, his face carried lines that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. He'd lost his own brother to a raid 5 years back, but something about this capture felt different. The warrior who'd finally told them his name was Tosa when Dr. Stone had set his broken leg wasn't like the others they'd fought. There was a weariness in his eyes that went deeper than physical pain. The jail sat at the back of the sheriff's office, a simple stone building that had been built to last. Its single cell had held drunks and thieves, but never anyone who'd faced a noose come morning. Tosa sat on the narrow cot, his weathered hands resting on his knees. His medicine pouch, a small leather bag that Dr. Stone had insisted they let him keep, lay beside him. Inside, Hawkins had glimpsed herbs and what looked like a carved stone, though he hadn't examined it closely. Some things deserved to stay private, even for a condemned man. Anna McCready had been 6 years old for 3 months now, though she'd stopped counting the days since her last birthday. Birthdays required someone to remember them, and the rotating care she received from various townspeople meant that dates and celebrations often slipped through the cracks. She'd been born to a woman who died bringing her into the world, a traveling woman whose name was carved on a simple wooden cross in the town cemetery. Nobody knew who Anna's father was, and the woman had taken that secret to her grave. The child moved through Willow Creek like a small ghost, welcomed nowhere, but turned away from nowhere either. Mrs. Patterson, the baker's wife, kept her on Mondays and Tuesdays. The schoolteacher, Miss Emma, took her Wednesdays and Thursdays. Fridays through Sundays found her with Dr. Margaret Stone, who delivered Anna and felt the weight of responsibility for the motherless child. It was Dr. Stone who'd given Anna the wooden doll she carried everywhere, a simple carved figure with a painted face that had worn smooth from constant handling. The doll had no name because Anna had never had anyone to help her choose one. She simply called it mine, and held it close during the long nights when she lay in whatever bed had been assigned to her for the week. The doll's wooden body was warm from her constant touch, and she'd whispered more secrets to its painted face than she'd ever shared with any living soul. Dr. Margaret Stone had come west 10 years ago with medical training that was rare for a woman and determination that was rarer still. She'd seen the worst that frontier life could offer: infected wounds, difficult births, fever that took children in the night. She'd also seen the unexpected kindness that could bloom in the harshest soil. Anna's situation troubled her deeply. The child was fed and clothed and schooled, but she belonged to no one completely. Margaret had tried to adopt her officially, but the territorial authorities required a married woman to take on such responsibility. And Margaret's husband had died of pneumonia 3 winters past. The cycles of violence that plagued their valley had started long before most current residents arrived. The Apache had hunted and traveled these lands for generations beyond counting. White settlers had begun arriving in larger numbers after the war, drawn by promises of land and opportunity. The collision had been inevitable, and it had been brutal for both sides. Tosa carried his own losses like stones in his chest. His wife, Morning Light, had died when cavalry soldiers burned their winter camp 4 years ago. She'd been trying to save their daughter, Little Dove, when a burning lodge beam had crushed them both. He'd found their bodies in the smoking ruins, and had carried grief like a second shadow ever since. The raids he'd led afterward had been driven by rage and pain, but they brought him no peace, only more emptiness. Now, bound and facing death, he found his thoughts drawn not to revenge or regret, but to unexpected memories. The sound of Little Dove's laughter, the way Morning Light had hummed while preparing meals, the stories his grandmother had told him about the spirits that lived in running water and whispered wisdom to those quiet enough to listen. The town's anticipation hung thick in the evening air. Families gathered behind closed doors, speaking in low voices about justice and closure. Some felt genuine satisfaction at the capture. Finally, one of them would pay for all the loss. Others harbored quiet doubts about the execution, though they kept such thoughts to themselves. The war between settlers and Apache had no clear beginning and would have no clean ending. But perhaps one death could serve as punctuation in a long, bloody sentence. Children pressed their faces to windows, trying to catch glimpses of the monster in the jail. They'd been warned away, told that Apache warriors were dangerous even when captured, that they had ways of casting curses and calling down spirits for revenge. Anna alone seemed immune to such fears. She'd watched from across the street as they'd brought Tosa in, noting how carefully Dr. Stone had treated his injuries, how he'd thanked her in broken English when she'd given him water. The wooden doll had been clutched tight in Anna's small fists as she'd observed the prisoner. Something in his bearing reminded her of the stories Miss Emma read about knights and noble warriors, though she couldn't have explained the connection if asked. He sat straight despite his pain, and his eyes held a sadness she recognized from her own reflection in still water. As evening settled over Willow Creek, lamplight flickered in windows while families shared their suppers and their conversations. Anna sat at Dr. Stone's kitchen table, mechanically eating soup and bread while her thoughts remained fixed on the jail and its occupant. The doll sat propped against her water glass, its painted eyes seeming to watch her with understanding. "You're quiet tonight, little one," Dr. Stone observed, settling into the chair across from Anna with her own bowl. Anna looked up, her young face serious in the lamplight. "The man in jail, is he really a monster?" Margaret Stone set down her spoon carefully. The question hung between them like smoke from the fireplace, complex and impossible to wave away simply. "What do you think?" she asked finally. Anna considered this, turning to whisper something to her doll before answering. "I think monsters don't cry when they think nobody's looking." The doctor's breath caught. She'd seen it too the moment when Tosa had thought himself unobserved and had let his carefully controlled expression crack just enough to reveal the pain beneath. "No," she agreed quietly. "I don't think they do." Outside, the October wind carried the sound of hammering from the town square, where volunteers were constructing the gallows that would serve justice come morning. The sound echoed off the buildings like a grim heartbeat, marking time toward an ending that felt both inevitable and wrong. In his cell, Tosa listened to the hammering and touched his medicine pouch gently. Inside, wrapped in soft deerskin, lay a small stone carved with symbols that meant beloved daughter. He'd carried it since little Dove's death, a talisman of love that had outlasted life itself. Tomorrow, when they put the rope around his neck, he would meet his family in the spirit world. The thought should have brought comfort, but instead, it left him feeling strangely hollow. Anna finished her soup and helped Dr. Stone clear the dishes, her wooden doll tucked under one arm. As they worked together in companionable silence, neither could have predicted that before another sunset, their quiet lives would be transformed by 4 simple words and the courage of a small heart that had never learned to fear what others called monsters. The morning of the execution dawned clear and cold, with frost painting the windows of Willow Creek in delicate patterns that would melt away before the sun climbed much higher. Anna had woken before Dr. Stone stirred, lying quietly in the narrow bed while her fingers traced the familiar contours of her wooden doll's face. Around her neck hung a tarnished silver locket, the only thing that had belonged to her mother. Dr. Stone had given it to her on her 5th birthday, explaining that it had been clutched in her mother's hand when she died. The locket held no picture, no lock of hair, nothing but empty space where love should have been dot by 8 o'clock. The town square buzzed with an energy that felt both festive and grim. Shopkeepers had closed their stores early. Families arrived in their Sunday clothes despite it being a Thursday. Children darted between adult legs while mothers called sharp warnings to stay close and behave. The gallows stood like a stark wooden skeleton against the morning sky, its noose swaying gently in the autumn breeze. Anna walked beside Dr. Stone, her small hand gripping the doll so tightly that her knuckles showed white. She'd asked twice if they had to come, and twice Dr. Stone had explained that some events marked the community. That witness was sometimes a responsibility, even when it brought no joy. Anna didn't understand the explanation, but she understood the sadness in Dr. Stone's voice. Sheriff Hawkins emerged from his office, with Tosa walking slowly beside him, leg irons restricting his movement to careful steps. The crowd's murmur shifted to something harder when they saw the prisoner, a sound like wind through dry leaves that carried decades of accumulated anger. Tosa kept his eyes forward, his weathered face composed, though Anna noticed how his fingers touched the medicine pouch at his side. "There's the devil," someone called from the crowd. "Finally going to pay for what he's done." Other voices joined in curses and accusations that made Anna press closer to Dr. Stone's skirts. She didn't understand all the words, but she recognized the tone. It was the same voice people used when they talked about rabid dogs or wolves that killed livestock. It was the voice that said something needed to be destroyed. Reverend Thomas stood near the gallows with his Bible, his face grave but determined. He'd spent the night wrestling with scripture about justice and mercy, about turning the other cheek, and protecting the innocent. In the end, he decided that his duty was to the community that supported his church. Though the decision sat uneasily in his chest, as Tosa was led toward the steps of the gallows, Anna felt something shift inside. Her chest a pulling sensation like iron drawn to a magnet. She watched the way he moved with dignity despite his chains, noticed how he glanced once at the sky as if memorizing the color of the morning. When he stumbled slightly on the wooden steps, she saw Sheriff Hawkins steady him with unexpected gentleness. "That's the one who killed my father," young Timothy Miller whispered to his friends, his voice carrying the bitter satisfaction of an adult's revenge in a 12-year-old's throat. Anna turned to look at Timothy, then back at the man on the gallows. The crowd pressed closer, eager for the final act of a drama that had played out over too many seasons. Women lifted children to their shoulders for a better view. Men called out suggestions about what the prisoner's last words should be. Something. And Anna broke loose, not broke apart, but broke free, like a bird that had been caged too long. She looked down at her wooden doll, its painted face serene and accepting, and suddenly understood what she had to do. Before Dr. Stone could react, before her own mind could reconsider, Anna ducked under the reaching hands of adults and pushed through the crowd toward the gallows. "Anna!" Dr. Stone called, but the child was already weaving between legs and around bodies with the determined efficiency of someone who had spent her life being small and overlooked. The crowd parted in surprise as Anna emerged at the front, her dress wrinkled from squeezing through the press of bodies. Sheriff Hawkins noticed her first, his hand instinctively moving to halt the proceedings. Tosa, standing with the noose being fitted around his neck, looked down and saw a small girl with serious eyes and tangled hair holding a wooden doll against her chest. Anna walked to the base of the gallows with the deliberate steps of someone approaching an altar. The crowd fell silent, hundreds of people holding their breath as a 6-year-old child looked up at the man they'd all come to see die. The locket at her throat caught the morning light, winking like a signal. "Please be my papa," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Mothers gasped. Fathers took involuntary steps backward. The executioner's hands froze on the rope. Sheriff Hawkins felt his world tilt sideways as 4 simple words rearranged everything he thought he understood about justice and innocence and the terrible mathematics of revenge. Tosa stared down at the child, his composed mask cracking as memory crashed over him like a cold river. "Little dove," his daughter's voice calling him Papa in Apache, the sound like water over smooth stones. The way she'd run to him after his hunting trips, her small arms wrapping around his legs while she told him everything that had happened in his absence. "Little one," he said, his voice rough with emotion he hadn't expected to feel again. "You should not be here." Anna stepped closer to the gallows, reaching up to touch the wooden post. "I don't have a papa. I don't have anybody. Please?" The simplicity of her request shattered something in the watching crowd. Mrs. Patterson pressed her hand to her mouth, remembering her own children and how fierce her love for them burned. Mr. Chun, the Chinese barber who understood what it meant to be seen as different and dangerous, felt tears he hadn't expected slip down his cheeks. Tosa closed his eyes for a moment, fighting against the tide of memory and pain that threatened to overwhelm him. When he opened them again, he saw not the crowd that had come to celebrate his death, but a small girl whose need was written across her face like words in a book. "What is your name, little one?" he asked, switching to English that carried the careful rhythm of someone for whom it was not a native tongue. "Anna," she replied, then held up her wooden doll. "This is mine. She doesn't have a name either." The conversation was impossible. A condemned Apache warrior and an orphaned white child discussing dolls and names while a noose waited and a crowd watched in stunned silence. Yet it continued, each word feeling both surreal and inevitable. "Sheriff." Hawkins found his voice first. "Anna, child, you need to step back now. This isn't a place for—" "Please," Anna interrupted, not taking her eyes off Tosa. "Can you be my papa? Just for today?" Tosa felt something break open in his chest. Not the sharp crack of fresh pain, but the slow opening of something that had been sealed too long. He looked at this small girl who saw a father where everyone else saw a monster. And for the first time in 4 years, he felt the possibility of something other than death. He began, then stopped, looking out at the crowd of faces that ranged from outraged to confused to unexpectedly moved. "Little Anna, Your people and my people have been enemies for a long time. Anna considered this seriously, her young face puzzled. But I'm not people. I'm just me. And you're just you. Can't just us be family? The question hung in the air like smoke from a sacred fire, challenging every assumption the watching townspeople had carried about race and hatred, and the impossibility of crossing certain lines. In the silence that followed, Anna sat down cross-legged in the dust at the base of the gallows, her doll in her lap, and looked up at Tosa with the patient expectation of someone who had asked a reasonable question and was waiting for a reasonable answer. Sheriff Hawkins realized he was holding his breath. The entire town was holding its breath. And on the gallows, an Apache warrior who had made peace with dying was discovering that sometimes a child's innocence could crack open spaces where mercy might take root and grow. The sun had climbed higher while Anna sat in the dust, but the warmth couldn't penetrate the chill that had settled over the town square. Sheriff Hawkins stood with his hand resting on his worn badge, the metal star that had represented law and order now feeling like it carried the weight of an impossible decision. The crowd remained frozen in tableau, parents holding children, men with their hats in their hands, women with tears they couldn't explain sliding down their cheeks. "Sheriff," the executioner said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade through cloth. "What are your orders?" Ben Hawkins looked from the man on the gallows to the child sitting below, then out at the faces of people he'd sworn to protect and serve. The badge on his chest had been his father's before him, earned in service to communities that needed someone to stand between chaos and civilization. But which side of that line was he standing on now? "Give me a moment," he said, then stepped closer to Anna. "Child, you need to understand what's happening here." "This man, his name is Tosa," Anna interrupted, still looking up at the figure on the gallows. "People have names, even when other people don't want to use them." The simple correction hit Hawkins like a physical blow. In 8 years of enforcing law, he'd sent men to jail, broken up fights, tracked rustlers across miles of hard country, but he'd never had a 6-year-old lecture him about the basic dignity of using someone's name. "Anna," Dr. Stone called from the crowd, her voice carrying both concern and something that might have been pride. "Come away from there, sweetheart." But Anna remained seated, her wooden doll arranged carefully in her lap as if this were a normal morning and she were simply playing in her own yard. "I'm waiting," she announced to anyone who might be listening. Papas are supposed to answer when their little girls ask them important questions. Tosa had been watching this exchange with growing amazement. In his 43 years, he'd seen men face death with courage, women defend their children with fierce determination, warriors charge into battle against impossible odds. But he'd never witnessed anything like the quiet stubbornness of this small girl who had decided that love could exist in a place where only hatred had been allowed to grow. "Sheriff Hawkins," he said, his accent making the English words sound formal and careful. "May I speak with the child?" The request was so unexpected, so contrary to every protocol of frontier justice, that Hawkins found himself nodding before his rational mind could object. The crowd murmured, some in approval, others in outrage, but no one moved to interfere as Tosa slowly sat down on the gallows platform, his leg irons clanking against the wood. "Little Anna," Tosa said, his voice gentler than anyone in the crowd had expected to hear, "do you know why these people want me to die?" Anna tilted her head, considering the question with the seriousness she gave to all important matters. "Because you fought with them. Because people they loved got hurt." "Yes," Tosa agreed. "And do you know that my people have been hurt too? That I have lost those I loved?" Anna's grip tightened on her doll. "Is that why you look so sad?" The question caught Tosa off guard. He'd spent years perfecting the stoic mask that warriors were expected to wear, but this child saw through it as easily as looking through clear water. "Yes, little one," I have been very sad for a very long time." "Me too," Anna said simply. "Maybe that's why we found each other." The crowd was quiet now, straining to hear every word of this impossible conversation. Mrs. Patterson found herself thinking of her own daughter, safe at home with instructions not to leave the house until the execution was finished. Mr. Chun thought of his own homeland, left behind when prejudice and opportunity had driven him halfway around the world. Reverend Thomas clutched his Bible and wondered if he was witnessing something sacred or something dangerous, or if there was any difference between the two. Sheriff Hawkins made a decision that would change the trajectory of his life. "Everyone, back away," he called to the crowd. "Give them space." "You can't be serious, Ben," called out Marcus Webb, who'd lost a son to Apache raids 3 years earlier. "This is justice we're talking about. Justice for all our dead." "Justice," Hawkins repeated slowly, testing the word like a man sampling water from an unfamiliar well. "Yeah, Marcus, I think it is." He approached the gallows and, after a moment's hesitation, sat down in the dust beside Anna. The gesture sent a ripple of shock through the watching townspeople, but it felt right in a way that standing with a noose had not. "Tell me about your family, Tosa," Hawkins said, using the name for the first time, "the ones you lost." Tosa looked down at the sheriff and the child, then out at the crowd that had come to celebrate his death. Something in their faces had changed, not all of them, but enough to matter. Where he'd expected to see only hatred, he found curiosity, confusion, and, in some cases, the beginning of something that might grow into understanding. "My wife was called Morning Light," he said, his voice carrying across the square with surprising clarity. "She could make anything grow: corn, squash, beans that would feed our people through the winter. She sang to the plants, told them stories so they would be strong." Anna leaned forward, captivated. "What did she look like?" "Like sunlight on water," Tosa replied, the description coming easily despite the years of silence about his loss. "And my daughter, Little Dove, she had her mother's laugh. When she was happy, you could hear it across the whole village." "What happened to them?" Dr. Stone had moved closer, her medical training overridden by human curiosity about this man she'd treated as a patient, but never known as a person. Tosa was quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on his knees as he reached back into memories that still carried the power to wound. "Soldiers came in winter. They said we had been raiding their settlements, but we had been camped in peace for 2 moons. They burned our lodges while families slept inside." The silence that followed was different from the earlier hush of anticipation. This was the quiet of people confronting the complexity of a story they'd thought they understood completely. Anna stood up, brushing dust from her dress, and walked to the gallows steps. Without hesitation, she climbed up and sat beside Tosa, her small presence both shocking and somehow natural. "I'm sorry your family died," she said, patting his arm with the unconscious comfort of a child who had never learned that some people were supposed to be untouchable. "When people I care about die, it makes a hole inside that never goes away." Tosa looked down at her small hand on his arm, the first gentle human touch he'd received since his capture. "You understand this feeling?" "My mama died when I was born," Anna explained matter-of-factly. "I don't remember her, but there's still a place where she should be. It's like having a room in your house that's always empty." The metaphor hit Tosa with unexpected force. Yes, that was exactly what loss felt like: empty rooms that echoed with phantom voices. Spaces that should have been filled with laughter and conversation and the comfortable sounds of family life. Around them, the town of Willow Creek stood, suspended between justice and mercy, between the familiar weight of old hatred and the uncomfortable possibility of forgiveness. Time moved differently in the town square that morning, as if the normal rhythm of hours and minutes had been suspended by the weight of what everyone was witnessing. Anna had curled up beside Tosa on the gallows platform, her wooden doll nestled between them like a bridge connecting two worlds that had never touched peacefully before. The crowd had thinned somewhat, some folks uncomfortable with the direction the execution had taken, others unable to leave because something unprecedented was unfolding before their eyes. Sheriff Hawkins had sent word to postpone any other business for the day. His deputy, young Frank Morrison, had ridden out to the surrounding homesteads to let people know that the execution had been delayed, though he couldn't quite explain why. The why was sitting on a gallows platform, teaching an Apache warrior how to braid grass into simple figures while the town tried to understand what they were seeing. Like this, Anna demonstrated, her small fingers working the prairie grass into the shape of a tiny person. Miss Emma taught me. She said it's good to keep your hands busy when your heart is worried. Tosa watched her movements with the attention he'd once given to tracking signs or reading weather patterns. There was something soothing about the repetitive motion, the way Anna's concentration smoothed the worry lines from her young face. He tried to mimic her movements, his larger hands clumsy at first with the delicate work. "You're getting it," Anna encouraged, then looked up at him with sudden shyness. "Could you teach me something? Something from your people?" The request caught Tosa off guard. In his experience, white settlers wanted nothing from Apache culture except distance from it. But Anna's question was genuine, her curiosity untainted by the fear or disgust he'd come to expect. "What would you like to know, little one?" Anna considered this seriously, her head tilted in the way that had become familiar to everyone who'd spent time with her. "Could you teach me a song? A happy one?" Tosa felt his throat tighten. The songs of his people were sacred things, passed down through generations, woven into the fabric of ceremonies and celebrations that these white settlers had tried to destroy. But looking at Anna's earnest face, he realized that teaching her might be an act of preservation rather than betrayal. "There's a song," he said carefully, "that mothers sing to help their children grow strong. It is about the corn maiden who brings life to the earth. Will you sing it for me?" The question hung in the air, and Tosa became aware that the conversation had drawn listeners. Dr. Stone stood nearby, her medical bag forgotten at her feet. Sheriff Hawkins had moved closer, his hand no longer resting on his weapon. Even some of the townspeople who had remained were leaning in, their hostility temporarily replaced by curiosity. Tosa began to sing in Apache, his voice low and melodic, carrying words that spoke of growing things and nurturing hands in the eternal cycle of seasons that brought death and rebirth in equal measure. The language was foreign to everyone listening, but the emotion was universal: a parent's love for a child, hope for the future, connection to the earth that sustained all life. When he finished, Anna clapped her hands together softly. "It's beautiful. What do the words mean?" "They say that love grows like corn," Tosa translated, "tall and strong when it is tended with care. They say that children are gifts from the Great Spirit, and that we must help them reach toward the sun." Anna nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense to her. "Could you teach me the words? Not all of them, just some?" The request was so innocent, so completely free of the cultural boundaries that had defined his entire life, that Tosa found himself nodding. "Yes, little one. I could teach you." Dr. Stone stepped forward then, her professional demeanor masking the emotional impact of what she'd just witnessed. "Mr. Tosa," she said formally, "your legs should be elevated. This sitting position isn't good for the healing." Tosa looked at her with surprise. In his world, enemies didn't concern themselves with the comfort of their prisoners. "Thank you, but no buts," Dr. Stone said firmly. "Anna, help me convince you." She paused, the word friend not quite fitting the extraordinary circumstances. "Help me convince Mr. Tosa to let me examine his leg properly." Anna immediately took on the task with the seriousness of someone given an important responsibility. "You have to let her check," she told Tosa solemnly. "Dr. Stone knows about fixing people." She fixed Mrs. Patterson's arm when she fell, and she helped birth the miller's baby last spring. The casual way Anna included him in the fabric of community life, as if his health and well-being were naturally everyone's concern, left Tosa speechless. Sheriff Hawkins solved the immediate problem by bringing a wooden crate from his office for Tosa to rest his leg on, and Dr. Stone began her examination with the same thorough care she would have given any patient. "The break is healing well," she announced after checking the splint and testing for swelling. "But you need to keep it elevated and avoid putting weight on it for at least another week." "Doctor," called Reverend Thomas from the edge of the crowd. "Might I have a word?" Dr. Stone glanced at Anna and Tosa, both of whom seemed perfectly content with their unusual arrangement, then walked over to speak with the Reverend in low tones. Their conversation was brief but intense, punctuated by gestures toward the gallows and occasional glances at the crowd. When Dr. Stone returned, her expression was troubled. "Mr. Tosa, I need to ask you something directly. The Reverend and some others are concerned about the delay. They want to know if you're using Anna to manipulate the situation, to try to escape justice." Tosa looked down at Anna, who had fallen, asleep against his side, her wooden doll clutched in her arms. Her trust was absolute, her small body relaxed in a way that spoke of complete safety. The idea that anyone could see manipulation in this pure connection between two lonely souls struck him as both absurd and heartbreaking. "Dr. Stone," he said quietly, careful not to wake Anna, "I have lived 43 years. I have been a warrior, a husband, a father. I have killed men in battle and watched my own family burn. In all those years, I have never met anyone who asked for my love simply because her heart was empty and hoped mine might not be." He touched Anna's hair gently, his weathered hand remarkably tender. "If this child wishes to call me Papa for whatever time remains to me, I will not dishonor her request by using it for my own purposes. Her love is too precious for such disrespect, Doctor." Stone studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you," she said simply. The day continued its strange suspended quality, with Anna alternately napping and chattering, teaching Tosa children's games and learning Apache words that she practiced with careful pronunciation. The crowd had largely dispersed, but a core group remained, some watching with hostile suspicion, others with growing fascination at this unprecedented cultural exchange happening on their gallows platform. As afternoon shadows began to lengthen, Sheriff Hawkins made a decision that would be debated in Willow Creek for years to come. "We're moving this inside," he announced. "Anna needs proper food and rest, and Tosa needs to keep that leg elevated properly." "You can't bring him into town," Marcus Webb protested. "He's a prisoner, not a guest. He's a man with a broken leg, and a little girl who's claimed him as family," Hawkins replied, his tone brooking no argument. "And right now, that's how we're going to treat him." The jail cell had been transformed by Anna's presence into something that resembled a peculiar sort of parlor. She had arranged her wooden doll on the small table, positioned Tosa's medicine pouch respectfully nearby, and somehow convinced Mrs. Buzzes Patterson to provide a proper meal that went far beyond the usual bread and water afforded to prisoners. Anna sat cross-legged on the floor beside Tosa's cot, working intently on a drawing she'd made using charcoal from the stove and a piece of bark she'd found in the courtyard. "What are you making, little one?" Tosa asked, watching her small fingers move with determined precision. Anna held up the bark, revealing a crude but recognizable drawing of two figures holding hands, one tall, one small, both smiling. "It's us," she announced with satisfaction, "so I can remember today when I'm old." The simple statement carried a weight that made Tosa's chest tighten. Anna was thinking beyond the immediate moment, imagining a future where this day would be a memory worth preserving. She'd drawn him not as a prisoner or a warrior, but as someone worthy of being remembered with happiness. "Anna," Dr. Stone called, from outside the cell, "you need to come eat your supper properly, and Mr. Tosa needs rest. Can't I stay?" Anna asked, not for the first time that afternoon. I could sleep right here on the floor. I've slept on floors before. The casual mention of her transient living arrangements hit both adults like a physical blow. Sheriff Hawkins, who had been reviewing paperwork at his desk, looked up with a frown. What do you mean you've slept on floors? Anna shrugged, the gesture carrying a child's acceptance of circumstances beyond her control. Sometimes there's not enough beds. Or sometimes I have bad dreams, and I don't want to wake anybody up, so I sleep on the floor instead. Tosa felt something dark and protective stir in his chest, an emotion he hadn't experienced since Little Dove's death. This should not be, he said, his accent thickening with emotion. Children should have their own place, their own bed, people who care if they have bad dreams. It's okay, Anna said quickly, sensing she'd upset the adults. People do care. They just have their own families to take care of first. I understand. The matter-of-fact way she accepted her marginal place in the community's affections made Sheriff Hawkins set down his pen with more force than necessary. Anna, when you have those bad dreams, what are they about? Anna was quiet for a moment, her attention apparently focused on adding details to her drawing. Sometimes I dream about being lost, she said finally. Like I'm in a big forest and I call and call, but nobody answers because nobody knows my voice well enough to recognize it. The description was so precise, so heartbreaking in its emotional accuracy, that Dr. Stone had to turn away to compose herself. Tosa reached through the bars and gently touched Anna's shoulder. In my people's beliefs, he said carefully, we think that spirits sometimes bring people together when they need each other. Maybe your spirit called to mine because we both know what it feels like to be lost. Anna looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too old for her young face. Is that why it felt right when I saw you? Like I was supposed to be here? Yes, little one. I think perhaps that is exactly why. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside, raised voices and the sound of several horses approaching fast. Sheriff Hawkins was on his feet immediately, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon. Through the window, they could see a group of riders from the surrounding homesteads, led by Marcus Webb and looking agitated. Stay here, Hawkins told Anna and Tosa, then stepped outside to meet the group. Men! Marcus called, swinging down from his horse with obvious frustration. What in the hell is going on here? We heard the execution was postponed because of some nonsense with the McCready girl. It's not nonsense, Marcus, Hawkins replied, his voice carrying the authority that had kept peace in Willow Creek for 8 years. Circumstances have changed. Circumstances? This from Tom Bradley, whose nephew had been killed in a raid 2 summers ago. The only circumstance that matters is that we've got one of them finally caught, and instead of hanging him, you're letting him play house with an orphan. Dr. Stone emerged from the jail, her medical bag in hand and her expression stern. Gentlemen, might I remind you that we're discussing a child's welfare here? Anna has never had a stable family situation, and for the first time in her life, she's found someone who makes her feel wanted and protected. Protected? Marcus laughed harshly. By a savage who's killed more white folks than we can count. By a man who's spent the day teaching her songs and helping her with crafts, Dr. Stone corrected firmly. By someone who's shown her more genuine affection in 6 hours than she's received in 6 years of being passed around like a burden. From inside the jail, Anna and Tosa could hear every word of the heated discussion. Anna moved closer to the cell bars, her drawing clutched in her small hands, her face showing the first real fear Tosa had seen from her all day. They want to take you away, she whispered. Tosa nodded gravely. Yes, little one. They believe justice requires my death. But that's not fair, Anna said, her voice rising with the passionate indignation that only children could muster. You're good. You're kind. You sang to me and taught me things, and you didn't try to hurt anybody. Fairness and justice are not always the same thing, Tosa said gently. Your people and mine have hurt each other for many years. Many on both sides have died. They believe my death will balance the scales. Anna was quiet for a moment, processing this with the seriousness she brought to all complex problems. Then she stood up and walked to the jail door. I want to talk to them, she announced. Anna, no, Dr. Stone said quickly, but Anna was already pushing past her toward the group of men. Mr. Webb, Anna said, her clear voice cutting through the adult arguments. Why do you want to kill my papa? The directness of the question, combined with her use of the word papa, stopped the conversation cold. Marcus Webb looked down at the small girl with her tangled hair and serious eyes, holding a piece of bark with a drawing of herself and the man he'd come to see executed. Anna, he said, his voice gentler than it had been moments before, that man in there isn't your papa. He's a dangerous criminal who's killed innocent people. But he's not dangerous to me, Anna replied with perfect logic. And he makes me feel like I matter. Isn't that what papas are supposed to do? The question hung in the evening air like smoke from a campfire, visible and persistent and impossible to ignore. Around them, the men who had ridden in demanding justice found themselves looking at a 6-year-old girl who had managed to complicate everything they thought they understood about right and wrong. Tom Bradley cleared his throat uncomfortably. Child, you don't understand the history here. The things that have happened. I understand that everybody's sad, Anna interrupted. I understand that people died, and that made everybody angry. But killing more people won't bring the dead ones back, will it? The simple truth of her statement settled over the group like dust after a whirlwind, leaving them all slightly stunned and uncertain how to respond. The evening light had taken on the golden quality that painters tried to capture but never quite managed, casting long shadows across the town square where the unused gallows stood, like a monument to intentions that had been derailed by the simple power of a child's love. Anna had been allowed to return to Tosa's cell after her confrontation with the angry riders. But the conversation with Marcus Webb and his men had shifted something in the atmosphere around the jail. Word was spreading through Willow Creek that the Apache prisoner and the orphan girl had formed an unlikely bond, and people were beginning to take sides. Inside the cell, Tosa sat with his back against the stone wall, his broken leg elevated on the wooden crate Dr. Stone had provided. Around his neck hung his eagle feather, a sacred ornament he'd earned in his youth during a vision quest that had lasted 4 days and 3 nights without food or water. The feather represented his connection to the spirit world, his place in the great circle of life that encompassed all living things. Anna had noticed it immediately when Dr. Stone had returned his personal effects, her eyes wide with wonder at the beautiful plumage. Tell me about the feather, Anna said, settling beside him with her wooden doll arranged carefully in her lap. Is it special? Tosa touched the feather gently, his weathered fingers tracing the intricate patterns that nature had painted along its length. Among my people, eagle feathers are very sacred. They connect us to the spirits, to the sky, to the wisdom of those who flew highest and saw farthest. How did you get it? When I was 17, I went alone into the mountains to speak with the spirits about my path in life. I fasted for 4 days, sitting in one place, waiting for guidance. On the 3rd night, an eagle landed near me and dropped this feather before flying away. Anna leaned closer, fascinated. What did the spirits tell you? Tosa was quiet for a long moment, remembering that long-ago vision that had shaped his entire adult life. They showed me many things. A wife who would love me, a daughter who would bring joy to my days, battles I would fight, losses I would bear. He paused, looking down at Anna with something approaching wonder. And at the very end, they showed me a small girl with hair the color of autumn grass, who would call me Papa when I had given up hope of ever hearing that word again. Anna's eyes widened. They showed you me? I think perhaps they did, little one, though I did not understand the vision then. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Chun, the Chinese barber, carrying a tray of food that smelled infinitely better than the usual jail fare. Behind him walked Mrs. Patterson, her arms full of blankets and what appeared to be a small pillow. "Thought the child might be more comfortable," Mrs. Patterson said gruffly, though her eyes were kind. And Chun here insisted on bringing something decent to eat. Mr. Chun bowed slightly to both Anna and Tosa. "In my country," he said in careful English, "we believe that hospitality to strangers brings good fortune. Also," he added with a small smile, "Anna helped me find my lost cat last month. I do not forget kindness." Anna beamed at this recognition, then looked at Tosa with pride. "Mr. Chun makes the best dumplings in the whole territory. Mrs. Patterson teaches me to bake bread sometimes when she's not too busy." The casual way Anna claimed these small connections to community life made Tosa realized how desperately she'd been collecting crumbs of affection wherever she could find them. That she would include him so naturally in her circle of people who mattered spoke to a generosity of spirit that humbled him. "Thank you both," Tosa said formally. "Your kindness honors us." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly at his courteous response. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "What did you expect?" "Someone who looked like a monster, I suppose. Someone who would be easier to hate." Tosa nodded with understanding. "Hatred is simpler when the enemy has no face, no family, no story that resembles your own." As they shared the meal that Mr. Chun had prepared, other townspeople began to drift by the jail, some hostile, others curious, a few openly sympathetic. Anna appointed herself as Tosa's translator and cultural ambassador, explaining Apache customs as she understood them from their afternoon together, and defending his character with the fierce loyalty of someone who had finally found something worth protecting. Dr. Stone returned as the sun was setting, bringing news that made everyone in the jail cell tense with new worry. "There's been a development," she said carefully. "A telegram came from the territorial capital. The governor's office has heard about the delayed execution, and they're sending a federal marshal to ensure that justice is carried out according to law." "When will he arrive?" Sheriff Hawkins asked. "Tomorrow afternoon, probably. Maybe evening if the weather slows him down." Anna looked from one adult face to another, reading the seriousness in their expressions, even if she didn't fully understand the implications. "What does that mean?" she asked. Dr. Stone knelt down to Anna's level, her voice gentle but honest. "It means that important people from far away have decided that the execution must happen, no matter what we think here in Willow Creek." Anna's face crumpled, and she threw her arms around Tosa's neck with desperate intensity. "No, they can't take my papa away. I just found him." Tosa held her close, his own heart breaking at the anguish in her voice. Over her head, he met the eyes of the adults who had become unexpected allies in his final hours. "How long do we have?" "Until the marshal arrives and can restore order," Hawkins said. "Maybe 12 hours, maybe 24. Then we must make them count," Tosa said quietly. As full darkness settled over Willow Creek, Anna refused to leave the jail cell, despite multiple attempts by well-meaning adults to convince her to sleep in a proper bed. She curled up on the makeshift bedding Mrs. Patterson had provided, her head pillowed against Tosa's leg, her wooden doll clutched tight against her chest. "Papa," she whispered, using the word with unconscious naturalness. "Will you sing me to sleep? The Corn Maiden song?" Tosa's voice was soft and low as he sang the ancient lullaby, the Apache words carrying across the quiet jail, like a prayer for peace in a world that had forgotten how to be still. Outside, the town of Willow Creek settled into an uneasy night, knowing that tomorrow would bring decisions that couldn't be undone, and changes that would echo through generations yet to come. In the jail cell, A warrior who had lost everything held a child who had never had anything, and both of them discovered that love could bloom in the darkest places, even when time was measured in hours rather than years. Dawn came too soon and not soon enough, bringing with it the sound of horses approaching at speed and the kind of tension that made even the morning birds fall silent. Anna had slept fitfully, waking several times during the night to make sure Tosa was still there, still breathing, still willing to stroke her hair when bad dreams threatened to pull her under. Now she sat beside his cot, braiding grass into small figures, while he taught her simple Apache words that she repeated with careful pronunciation. "She," he said softly. "She," Anna echoed. "What does it mean?" "My daughter," Tosa replied, his voice thick with emotion. He no longer tried to hide. Doctor Stone had arrived early to check on them both, bringing coffee for the adults and fresh bread for Anna. As she examined Tosa's leg, unwrapping the splint to assess the healing, she noticed something she'd missed in her previous examinations, a dark stain on the leather of his medicine pouch. "What's this?" she asked, pointing to the discoloration. Tosa glanced down, then carefully opened the pouch and withdrew a folded piece of paper. The document was stained with what was unmistakably dried blood, and as Dr. Stone examined it more closely, she realized it was a letter written in English. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the letter. Tosa nodded, though his expression had grown troubled. "I had forgotten it was there. In the chaos of capture, in the pain of my injuries, ... Dr. Stone unfolded the paper carefully, her medical training having taught her to handle delicate things with respect. As she read, her face grew pale, then flushed with anger, then settled into a grim expression that made Sheriff Hawkins look up from his morning paperwork. "Ben," she said quietly, "you need to read this right now." Hawkins crossed to the cell, took the letter, and began to read aloud in a voice that grew more strained with each word. "Uncle Tosa, the war party of my brother Standing Wolf, grows impatient with peace. They plan to raid the white settlement at Willow Creek when the moon is dark. Many innocents will die, including children. I have tried to reason with them, but blood fever has taken hold. You are respected. You could stop this. Come quickly, or there will be no going back from what follows. The attack comes in 3 days' time. Your nephew, running bear." The silence that followed was deafening. Anna stopped braiding grass and looked up at the adults, sensing that something fundamental had shifted in the room. Sheriff Hawkins read the letter again, then a third time, before looking at Tosa with an expression that mixed disbelief with dawning understanding. "This is dated 6 days ago," Hawkins said slowly. "The day before your capture." Tosa nodded, his weathered face grave. "I was riding to warn your town when your patrol found me. The letter was in my pouch, but when the horses collided and my leg broke, I could think only of pain. Later, when the fever came from infection, I forgot about everything except surviving each hour." Dr. Stone sank into the chair beside the cell, the implications of the discovery hitting her like a physical blow. "You weren't leading a raid. You were coming to prevent one." "Yes," Tosa said simply. "Running Bear is my sister's son. A good boy who has seen too much violence, who tries to keep the young warriors from making mistakes that cannot be undone. When he sent word about Standing Wolf's plans, I knew I had to try." Anna looked up from her grass figures, her young mind struggling to process what the adults were discussing. "Papa, what's a raid?" Tosa's expression grew pained. How could he explain to this innocent child the cycles of violence that had defined his world? It is when angry people hurt other people because they are angry about being hurt themselves. Like when Tommy Miller throws rocks because his papa died? The simple analogy struck everyone in the room with its accuracy. Yes, little one. Exactly like that, but much worse. Sheriff Hawkins was pacing now, his mind racing through the implications of what they'd discovered. If this letter is genuine, if you were really coming to warn us, then we've been about to execute a man who was trying to save our lives, Dr. Stone finished grimly. But there's more, Hawkins said, his voice tight with new worry. If they... Raid was planned for 3 days after this letter was written, and that was 6 days ago. They're coming today, Tosa said quietly. Standing Wolf is not a patient man. When I did not return, when his scouts reported that I had been captured, he would have seen it as a sign that the spirits favored attack over caution. The reality of their situation settled over the jail like smoke from a fire that was spreading, faster than anyone could contain it. Anna sensed the adult's fear without understanding its source, moving closer to Tosa and taking his hand in both of hers. Papa, are you in trouble? We are all in trouble, Tosa replied gently. Doctor. Stone stood abruptly, her medical training overridden by the urgent need for action. Ben, we have to warn the town. If there's going to be an attack, how do we know this letter is real? Hawkins interrupted, though his tone suggested he already believed it was. How do we know this isn't some elaborate deception? Tosa reached into his medicine pouch and withdrew the carved stone that bore his daughter's name. Sheriff Hawkins, you have spent time with me. You have seen how I am with Anna. Do you believe I would use a child's love to manipulate adults into saving my life? Hawkins looked at Anna, who was now braiding Tosa's hair with the unconscious intimacy of a daughter caring for her father. The bond between them was obviously genuine, built on something far deeper than tactical advantage. No, Hawkins said finally. I don't believe you would. Then you must believe that Standing Wolf comes today with 20 warriors who know nothing of mercy, who have been told that this town represents everything that has wronged our people. They will not distinguish between those who have hurt us and those who have not. They will see only enemies. Anna tugged on Tosa's sleeve. Papa, could you stop them? Could you tell them not to hurt people? Tosa looked down at her with infinite tenderness. I could try, little one, but I would have to be free to do so. The weight of decision settled on Sheriff Hawkins like a physical burden. Everything he'd been trained to believe about law and order, about the proper procedures for handling prisoners and maintaining justice, was being challenged by circumstances that had no precedent in his experience. If I release you, he said, slowly, if I trust you enough to unshackle you and let you try to prevent this attack, what guarantee do I have that you won't simply join your nephew's war party? You have the word of a man who has found something worth living for, Tosa replied, his hand resting gently on Anna's head. You have the promise of someone who has been given a reason to believe that peace between our peoples might be possible. Anna looked up at Sheriff Hawkins with eyes that held all the trust in the world. Mr. Hawkins, Papa wouldn't lie. He taught me that lying makes holes in your spirit that let all the good things leak out. The simple faith in her voice was more compelling than any legal argument could have been. Hawkins looked from Anna to Tosa to Dr. Stone, then walked to his desk and retrieved the keys to the cell. If you're lying to me, he said, as he unlocked the shackles around Tosa's ankles, if you're playing some kind of game that gets people in this town killed, I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. If I'm lying, Tosa replied solemnly, then I do not deserve to draw another breath. As the shackles fell away, Anna clapped her hands together with delight. Now you can walk properly again. But Tosa's expression remained grave as he tested his weight on the injured leg. Little one, I need you to be very brave now. There may be danger coming, and I must try to stop it. Can I come with you? No, You must stay here, where the sheriff and Dr. Stone can keep you safe. Anna's face crumpled with disappointment, but she nodded with the solemnity of someone who understood that some adult decisions were not negotiable. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a smooth river stone she'd found the day before, pressing it into Tosa's palm. This is my promise stone, she said seriously. It means I'll wait for you, and you have to promise to come back to me. Tosa closed his fingers around the stone, feeling its warmth from Anna's body heat. "I promise, little daughter. No matter what happens, I will come back to you." As he prepared to leave the jail that had been both his prison and his sanctuary, Tosa realized that Anna had given him something he'd lost when his family died, a reason to survive that was bigger than revenge or despair. She had reminded him that love could be stronger than hate, that hope could triumph over the darkest circumstances, and that sometimes the most profound truths came from the mouths of children who saw the world with unclouded eyes. The transformation of Willow Creek from a sleepy frontier town into a potential battleground happened with startling speed once Sheriff Hawkins understood the true nature of the threat they faced. Within an hour of releasing Tosa, the main street buzzed with urgent activity as families loaded wagons with essential belongings and debated whether to flee or fortify their homes. The irony was not lost on anyone that the man they'd planned to execute at dawn was now their best hope for survival. The transformation of Willow Creek from a sleepy frontier town into a potential battleground happened with startling speed once Sheriff Hawkins understood the true nature of the threat they faced. Within an hour of releasing Tosa, the main street buzzed with urgent activity as families loaded wagons with essential belongings and debated whether to flee or fortify their homes. The irony was not lost on anyone that the man they planned to execute at dawn was now their best hope for survival. Anna had been moved to Dr. Stone's house, considered the safest location in town due to its stone construction and elevated position overlooking the main approaches. She sat at the window with her wooden doll, watching Tosa move through the town with Sheriff Hawkins, his limp barely noticeable as adrenaline overrode the pain in his healing leg. The promised stone he'd given her remained clutched in her small fist, and she whispered to it periodically as if it were a direct communication line to the man she'd claimed as her father. "Why can't I help?" Anna asked Dr. Stone for the fourth time, her frustration evident in the way she fidgeted with her doll's wooden arms. "Because the most helpful thing you can do right now is stay safe," Dr. Stone replied, checking the medical supplies she'd gathered in case of casualties. "Your papa needs to know you're protected so he can focus on stopping the violence." Outside, Tosa worked with an efficiency born of decades of tactical experience. He'd quickly assessed the town's defensive weaknesses: too many buildings made of wood, too few elevated positions for marksmen, Main Street too wide to defend effectively. But he also saw advantages that the townspeople had overlooked. The general store's stone foundation could serve as a stronghold. The church bell tower provided an excellent observation post, and the creek that gave the town its name formed a natural barrier on one side. "Standing Wolf will come from the west," Tosa explained to the hastily assembled group of men who had gathered around him and Sheriff Hawkins. "He prefers dawn attacks when the sun is behind his warriors, but if he's seen your preparations, he may wait for dusk instead." Marcus Webb, who had ridden in that morning demanding execution, now found himself listening intently to tactical advice from the same man. "How many warriors are we talking about?" 20, maybe 25, Tosa replied. "All young men eager to prove themselves. They will be well-armed and fearless, but they will also be undisciplined. Standing Wolf has courage but lacks patience for complex strategy." Tom Bradley spat in the dirt, his expression conflicted. "I still don't understand why we should trust you. For all we know, this is part of some larger plan." Tosa nodded with understanding rather than anger. "Mr. Bradley, your suspicion is wise. But consider this: if I were deceiving you, what would I gain? I am one man with a broken leg against 20 warriors. If I wanted to help them succeed, the best thing I could do would be nothing." Sheriff Hawkins stepped forward. "Tom, we don't have the luxury of doubt right now. If Tosa is lying, we'll deal with that after we survive. If he's telling the truth and we ignore his advice, some of us won't be alive to regret it." The preparations continued through the morning with grim efficiency. Women and children were moved to the most defensible buildings. Men who had never worked together found themselves sharing ammunition and coordinating fields of fire. Mr. Chun revealed an unexpected cache of fireworks from his homeland, which Tosa suggested could be used to confuse and disorient attackers. Mrs. Patterson organized the women to prepare medical supplies and food for what might be a long siege. Through it all, Anna remained at her window post, occasionally calling out observations to Dr. Stone about what she could see happening in the street. Her young eyes were sharp, and she'd spent enough time wandering the town to know when something was out of place. "Dr. Stone," Anna said suddenly, her voice tight with concern. "There are men on the ridge. I can see them moving between the trees." Dr. Stone joined Anna at the window, squinting against the afternoon sun. "Where?" Anna pointed with remarkable precision for a 6-year-old. "There, by the big pine with the broken top. And over there, near the rocks that look like a sleeping bear." Dr. Stone grabbed her field glasses and confirmed Anna's observation with growing alarm. "Ben!" she called out the window to Sheriff Hawkins. "We've got scouts on the western ridge." The news galvanized the defenders into final preparations. Tosa studied the ridge through the borrowed field glasses, his expression growing more troubled as he counted the figures moving among the trees. "More than I expected," he told Hawkins quietly. "Standing Wolf has gathered warriors from other bands. This is not just a raid. This is meant to be a statement." "What kind of statement?" "That peace between our peoples is impossible. That those who try to build bridges should be destroyed along with their would-be allies." The implication hung heavy in the air. If Standing Wolf had indeed gathered a larger force, then Tosa's presence in Willow Creek might have actually escalated the threat rather than diminished it. The young war leader might see his uncle's capture and apparent collaboration as the ultimate betrayal, requiring a response that would echo across the territory as afternoon shadows began to lengthen. Anna made a decision that would have horrified the adults if they'd known about it. While Dr. Stone was busy organizing medical supplies in the back room, Anna slipped out of the house with her wooden doll tucked under her arm and the promise Stone still clutched in her fist. She found Tosa behind the general store, working with 3 other men to reinforce a makeshift barricade. His concentration was complete as he demonstrated how to angle the wooden planks for maximum protection against rifle fire. But he looked up immediately when Anna's small voice called his name. "She!" he exclaimed, setting down his tools and moving toward her with obvious concern. "You should not be here. It is not safe." "I know," Anna said seriously, "but I had to give you something." She held out her wooden doll, the constant companion that had been her only family for as long as she could remember. "Her name is Hope," Anna announced, finally giving voice to something she'd carried in her heart but never spoken aloud. I want you to keep her safe while you stop the bad men from hurting people." Tosa took the doll with the reverence he might have shown a sacred object, understanding instinctively that Anna was offering him her most precious possession. "Little daughter, this is yours." "I cannot, Papa," Anna interrupted, using a tone that was pure parental authority, despite coming from a 6-year-old throat. "Hope needs to stay with you, so you remember that good things can happen even when everything seems scary. And when you come back, you can tell me all the brave things she helped you do." The gift was so profound, so generous in its simple faith, that Tosa felt tears threaten for the first time since his capture. He tucked the doll inside his shirt, close to his heart, and knelt down to Anna's level. "I will guard her with my life," he promised solemnly. "And when this day ends, Hope and I will both come home to you." Anna threw her arms around his neck, hugging him with the fierce intensity of someone who understood that this might be goodbye. "I love you, Papa." "And I love you," she, "more than all the stars in the sky." Sheriff Hawkins appeared around the corner of the building, his relief at finding Anna evident in his expression. "There you are. Dr. Stone is worried sick." As Hawkins escorted Anna back to safety, Tosa touched the wooden doll through his shirt and felt something he hadn't experienced since his own daughter's death: the absolute determination that comes from having someone to protect who is worth any sacrifice. The promised stone Anna had given him seemed to pulse with warmth in his other hand, and he realized that he was no longer just trying to prevent a massacre. He was fighting for the possibility of a future where love could be stronger than hate, where an Apache warrior and a white child could be family, where the cycles of violence that had defined both their peoples might finally be broken. The sun continued its relentless journey toward the western horizon, and with each passing minute, the likelihood of battle grew stronger. But in his heart, Tosa carried the faith of a small girl who had looked at a condemned man and seen a father who had given him her most treasured possession and trusted him to bring hope back home safely. In the distance, war cries began to echo off the canyon walls, and Tosa knew that Standing Wolf's patience had finally run out. Anna had been moved to Dr. Stone's house, considered the safest location in town due to its stone construction and elevated position overlooking the main approaches. She sat at the window with her wooden doll, watching Tosa move through the town with Sheriff Hawkins, his limp barely noticeable as adrenaline overrode the pain in his healing leg. The promised stone he'd given her remained clutched in her small fist, and she whispered to it periodically, as if it were a direct communication line to the man she claimed as her father. "Why can't I help?" Anna asked Dr. Stone for the fourth time, her frustration evident in the way she fidgeted with her doll's wooden arms. "Because the most helpful thing you can do right now is stay safe," Dr. Stone replied, checking the medical supplies she'd gathered in case of casualties. "Your papa needs to know you're protected so he can focus on stopping the violence." Outside, Tosa worked with an efficiency born of decades of tactical experience. He'd quickly assessed the town's defensive weaknesses: too many buildings made of wood, too few elevated positions for marksmen, Main Street too wide to defend effectively. But he also saw advantages that the townspeople had overlooked. The general store's stone foundation could serve as a stronghold. The church bell tower provided an excellent observation post, and the creek that gave the town its name formed a natural barrier on one side. "Standing Wolf will come from the west," Tosa explained to the hastily assembled group of men who had gathered around him and Sheriff Hawkins. "He prefers dawn attacks when the sun is behind his warriors, but if he's seen your preparations, he may wait for dusk instead." Marcus Webb, who had ridden in that morning demanding execution, now found himself listening intently to tactical advice from the same man. "How many warriors are we talking about?" 20, maybe 25, Tosa replied. "All young men eager to prove themselves. They will be well-armed and fearless, but they will also be undisciplined. Standing Wolf has courage, but lacks patience for complex strategy." Tom Bradley spat in the dirt, his expression conflicted. "I still don't understand why we should trust you. For all we know, this is part of some larger plan." Tosa nodded with understanding rather than anger. "Mr. Bradley, your suspicion is wise. But consider this: if I were deceiving you, what would I gain? I am one man with a broken leg against 20 warriors. If I wanted to help them succeed, the best thing I could do would be nothing." Sheriff Hawkins stepped forward. "Tom, we don't have the luxury of doubt right now. If Tosa is lying, we'll deal with that after we survive. If he's telling the truth and we ignore his advice, some of us won't be alive to regret it." The preparations continued through the morning with grim efficiency. Women and children were moved to the most defensible buildings. Men who had never worked together found themselves sharing ammunition and coordinating fields of fire. Mr. Chen revealed an unexpected cache of fireworks from his homeland, which Tosa suggested could be used to confuse and disorient attackers. Mrs. Patterson organized the women to prepare medical supplies and food for what might be a long siege. Through it all, Anna remained at her window post, occasionally calling out observations to Dr. Stone about what she could see happening in the street. Her young eyes were sharp, and she'd spent enough time wandering the town to know when something was out of place. "Dr. Stone," Anna said suddenly, her voice tight with concern. "There are men on the ridge. I can see them moving between the trees." Dr. Stone joined Anna at the window, squinting against the afternoon sun. "Where?" Anna pointed with remarkable precision for a 6-year-old. "There, by the big pine with the broken top. And over there, near the rocks that look like a sleeping bear." Dr. Stone grabbed her field glasses and confirmed Anna's observation with growing alarm. "Ben," she called out the window to Sheriff Hawkins, "we've got scouts on the western ridge." The news galvanized the defenders into final preparations. Tosa studied the ridge through the borrowed field glasses, his expression growing more troubled as he counted the figures moving among the trees. "More than I expected," he told Hawkins quietly. "Standing Wolf has gathered warriors from other bands. This is not just a raid. This is meant to be a statement." "What kind of statement?" "That peace between our peoples is impossible. That those who try to build bridges should be destroyed along with their would-be allies." The implication hung heavy in the air. If Standing Wolf had indeed gathered a larger force, then Tosa's presence in Willow Creek might have actually escalated the threat rather than diminished it. The young war leader might see his uncle's capture and apparent collaboration as the ultimate betrayal, requiring a response that would echo across the territory as afternoon shadows began to lengthen. Anna made a decision that would have horrified the adults if they'd known about it. While Dr. Stone was busy organizing medical supplies in the back room, Anna slipped out of the house with her wooden doll tucked under her arm and the promise. Stone still clutched in her fist. She found Tosa behind the general store, working with 3 other men to reinforce a makeshift barricade. His concentration was complete as he demonstrated how to angle the wooden planks for maximum protection against rifle fire. But he looked up immediately when Anna's small voice called his name. "She," he exclaimed, setting down his tools and moving toward her with obvious concern. "You should not be here. It is not safe." "I know," Anna said seriously, "but I had to give you something." She held out her wooden doll, the constant companion that had been her only family for as long as she could remember. "Her name is Hope," Anna announced, finally giving voice to something she'd carried in her heart, but never spoken aloud. I want you to keep her safe while you stop the bad men from hurting people." Tosa took the doll with the reverence he might have shown a sacred object, understanding instinctively that Anna was offering him her most precious possession. "Little daughter, this is yours." "I cannot, Papa," Anna interrupted, using a tone that was pure parental authority, despite coming from a 6-year-old throat. "Hope needs to stay with you, so you remember that good things can happen, even when everything seems scary. And when you come back, you can tell me all the brave things she helped you do." The gift was so profound, so generous in its simple faith, that Tosa felt tears threaten for the first time since his capture. He tucked the doll inside his shirt, close to his heart, and knelt down to Anna's level. "I will guard her with my life," he promised solemnly. "And when this day ends, Hope and I will both come home to you." Anna threw her arms around his neck, hugging him with the fierce intensity of someone who understood that this might be goodbye. "I love you, Papa, and I love you," she, "more than all the stars in the sky." Sheriff Hawkins appeared around the corner of the building, his relief at finding Anna evident in his expression. "There you are. Dr. Stone is worried sick." As Hawkins escorted Anna back to safety, Tosa touched the wooden doll through his shirt and felt something he hadn't experienced since his own daughter's death: the absolute determination that comes from having someone to protect who was worth any sacrifice. The promised stone Anna had given him seemed to pulse with warmth in his other hand, and he realized that he was no longer just trying to prevent a massacre. He was fighting for the possibility of a future where love could be stronger than hate, where an Apache warrior and a white child could be family, where the cycles of violence that had defined both their peoples might finally be broken. The sun continued its relentless journey toward the western horizon, and with each passing minute, the likelihood of battle grew stronger. But in his heart, Tosa carried the faith of a small girl who had looked at a condemned man and seen a father who had given him her most treasured possession and trusted him to bring hope back home safely. In the distance, war cries began to echo off the canyon walls, and Tosa knew that Standing Wolf's patience had finally run out. The attack came with the setting sun, as Tosa had predicted, the war cries rising from the western ridge like the howl of storm winds through canyon walls. Anna pressed her face to Dr. Stone's window, her makeshift family portrait created from carefully arranged stones spread across the windowsill, smooth river rocks representing herself, Tosa, Sheriff Hawkins, Dr. Stone, and even the townspeople who had begun to accept their unlikely bond. The arrangement showed them all connected in a circle, hands touching, a child's vision of how the world should work when fear didn't rule people's hearts. "Get down from there," Dr. Stone called, pulling Anna away from the window just as the first rifle shots cracked across the valley. The sound was sharp and immediate, nothing like the distant thunder Anna had imagined gunfire would resemble. From his position behind the reinforced barricade near the general store, Tosa could see Standing Wolf leading the charge down the hillside. His nephew's face, painted for war and twisted with a rage that spoke of pain, turned outward toward the world. Behind him rode warriors from 3 different bands, young men who had seen their families scattered, their hunting grounds fenced, their children taken to distant schools where they were forbidden to speak their own language. "There!" Sheriff Hawkins called out, pointing toward the main street where the first riders had appeared. "Remember, aim for the horses first if you can. A warrior on foot is easier to deal with than one mounted." Tosa raised the rifle Hawkins had given him, sighting down the barrel at riders who might have been his own people in different circumstances. The irony was not lost on him that he was about to fight Apache warriors to protect white settlers. But the stone portrait Anna had arranged in Dr. Stone's window had shown him a truth that transcended the simple divisions of race and blood. Family was not always about shared heritage. Sometimes it was about shared hope. The first wave of attackers hit the outer defenses with the force of a flash flood, their war cries mixing with gunfire and the screams of wounded horses. Mr. Chun's fireworks exploded in brilliant bursts of color and sound, startling the horses and causing 2 riders to lose control of their mounts. The confusion bought the defenders precious seconds to coordinate their response. Standing Wolf himself rode straight for the jail, perhaps thinking his uncle might still be held there. When he found it empty, his rage intensified, and he wheeled his horse toward the center of town, calling out in Apache for his warriors to show no mercy to the white eyes who had corrupted his uncle's spirit. Tosa stepped out from behind the barricade, his rifle lowered, and called back in the same language. "Nephew, I am here." The sound of his uncle's voice stopped Standing Wolf's charge as effectively as a rope across the trail. The young war leader spun his horse around, his eyes wide with disbelief at seeing Tosa free and apparently fighting alongside their enemies. "Uncle," Standing Wolf called across the distance between them, "what poison have they put in your mind? What lies have they told you?" "No lies, nephew," Tosa replied, his voice carrying clearly over the sounds of battle. "I have found something here worth protecting, something worth choosing peace over war." Standing Wolf's laugh was bitter and harsh. "Peace? While our people are driven from their lands? While our children forget the songs of their grandmothers? You speak of peace while standing with those who would destroy us. Behind him, the other warriors had regrouped, forming a semicircle that trapped the townspeople in a deadly crossfire. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, and Tosa knew that words alone would not be enough to prevent massacre. From Dr. Stone's window, Anna watched the confrontation with her heart hammering against her ribs. She could see Tosa standing in the open, vulnerable to the warriors who surrounded him, and she understood with the clarity that sometimes comes to children that her papa was in terrible danger. Without thinking, without consulting any adult authority, Anna grabbed her stone portrait from the windowsill and ran for the door. Dr. Stone tried to stop her, but Anna was small and quick and determined, slipping past the doctor's reaching hands and out into the street where gunfire still echoed off. The buildings. "Anna, no!" Dr. Stone screamed, but the child was already running toward the center of town, clutching her stones in both hands. Tosa saw her first, a small figure in a faded dress, running straight into the middle of a battlefield with the fearless determination of someone who had never learned that some things were impossible. His heart stopped as he realized what Anna was doing, and he moved toward her without conscious thought, his injured leg protesting but carrying him anyway. Standing, Wolf saw the movement and raised his rifle, thinking his uncle was attempting to flee or attack. But then he saw what Tosa was running toward, a tiny, white child who had somehow appeared in the middle of their war, and confusion replaced rage on his painted face. Anna reached the center of the street and knelt down, carefully arranging her stones in the same pattern she'd created at the window. As bullets whined overhead and warriors shouted in languages she didn't understand, she worked with the intense concentration of someone performing a sacred ritual, creating her vision, a family in peace in the midst of violence and hatred. The sight of Anna arranging her stones in the middle of the battlefield created a moment of surreal suspension, as if the entire conflict had paused to witness something unprecedented. Warriors who had been ready to kill stopped their advance, confused by the appearance of a small child who seemed completely unaware of the danger surrounding her. Townspeople who had been preparing to die defending their homes found themselves staring at an act of pure faith that defied every rule of warfare they understood. Tosa reached Anna first, dropping to his knees beside her as she carefully positioned the last stone in her family circle. His hand shook as he touched her shoulders, checking for injuries, while his mind reeled at her courage and recklessness. What are you doing?" he asked, his voice rough with fear and love and amazement. Anna looked up at him with complete calm, as if kneeling in a battlefield was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm showing them," she said simply. "I'm showing them how we're supposed to be family." Standing Wolf had dismounted and approached slowly, his rifle still raised but his expression increasingly troubled. He spoke to Tosa in rapid Apache, demanding explanations, but his eyes kept returning to Anna and her carefully arranged stones. The other warriors formed a loose circle around them, uncertain how to proceed when their target was a child who showed no fear. "She is your daughter?" Standing Wolf asked in English, his voice carrying disbelief and something that might have been wonder. "Yes," Tosa replied without hesitation. "She is my daughter. She chose me, and I chose her." Anna stood up then, dusting off her dress with the matter-of-fact efficiency of someone completing a necessary task. She looked up at Standing Wolf with the same serious attention she gave to all adults, studying his painted face and the weapons he carried with curious rather than fearful eyes. "You look like my papa," she observed. "Are you family too?" The simple question hit Standing Wolf like a physical blow. This small white child was looking at him with the same acceptance she showed Tosa, seeing family resemblance instead of war paint, potential connection instead of mortal threat. Her stone arrangement lay between them like a bridge across decades of mutual hatred. Standing Wolf began, then stopped, looking from Anna to Tosa to the circle of townspeople who had gradually emerged from their defensive positions. Sheriff Hawkins stood with his weapon lowered. Dr. Stone had tears streaming down her face. And even Marcus Webb was staring at the scene with something approaching awe. Anna picked up one of her stones and held it out to Standing Wolf. "This one is for you," she said. "Every family needs to have a place for everyone." Standing Wolf stared at the offered stone as if it were a venomous snake. Everything he had been taught about white settlers, everything he had experienced of their cruelty and betrayal, was being challenged by a 6-year-old girl who wanted to include him in her makeshift family portrait. "Uncle," he said to Tosa, his voice barely above a whisper, "what has happened here?" Tosa stood slowly, Anna's small hand finding his automatically. "What has happened, nephew, is that I learned something I thought was impossible. I learned that love can exist between peoples who have been enemies. I learned that a child's heart sees truth that adult minds cannot accept." Around them, the other warriors were lowering their weapons, influenced by their leader's confusion and the strange power of Anna's unwavering faith. The townspeople remained tense but hopeful, sensing that the immediate danger had passed, but uncertain about what would follow. Dr. Stone approached slowly, her medical bag in hand and her expression mixing relief with professional concern. "Anna, sweetheart, are you hurt?" "No," Anna replied, then looked up at Standing Wolf with the serious expression that had become her trademark. "But I think he is. Not on the outside, on the inside, where hearts get broken." The diagnosis was so accurate, so simply stated that Standing Wolf actually laughed, a sound that held more pain than humor, but marked the beginning of something that might eventually become healing. "She sees much for one so small," he said to Tosa. "Yes," Tosa agreed. "She sees what we have forgotten." "How to see?" Standing Wolf knelt down to Anna's level, setting his rifle aside in a gesture that spoke louder than any words could have. "Little one, why do you trust so easily? Do you not know that I came here to hurt your people?" Anna considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. "I know you're angry. I know you're sad. But I also know that angry, sad people can learn to be happy if someone loves them enough." She placed the stone gently in Standing Wolf's palm, closing his fingers around it with the patience of someone teaching a difficult lesson to a slow student. "That's what my papa taught me. That's what family does." As the sun completed its descent behind the western mountains, the war party that had come to destroy Willow Creek found themselves sitting in a circle with the townspeople they had intended to kill, sharing food and water while Anna explained her stone portrait and the philosophy of family that had transformed a condemned Apache warrior into a beloved father. The shared victory feast that followed would be remembered for generations as the night when two peoples who have been enemies discovered that sometimes the greatest courage comes from the smallest hearts, and that love, once planted, can grow in the most unlikely soil. 3 months had passed since the day that would forever be known in Willow Creek as Anna's miracle, and the autumn light filtering through the windows of the small house at the edge of town carried the golden warmth of a world that had somehow managed to heal itself. Anna sat at the wooden table that Tosa had built with his own hands, carefully practicing the Apache letters he'd been teaching her alongside the English alphabet Miss Emma insisted she master for school. The house itself was a testament to the changes that had swept through the community like a gentle but persistent wind. Built with lumber donated by the townspeople and labor provided by both settlers and Apache visitors, it stood as a physical symbol of the bridge Anna had constructed between two worlds with nothing more than stones and stubborn love. The adoption papers, official documents that had required the territorial governor's personal attention, hung framed on the wall next to Anna's original stone portrait drawing, now carefully preserved under glass. "Papa," Anna called from her seat at the table. "How do you write teacher in Apache?" Tosa looked up from the leather he was working, crafting a new pair of moccasins for Anna's growing feet. His hands moved with the sure skill of someone who had learned traditional crafts from his grandmother, but his attention was completely focused on his daughter. Ah, that is a good word to know. In Apache, we say, Nalan, one who shows the path. Anna repeated the word carefully, her pronunciation much improved from those first halting attempts months ago. She added it to the growing list of Apache vocabulary she kept in a small journal Dr. Stone had given her, a record of her cultural education that would have been unthinkable before the miracle. The sound of approaching horses drew their attention to the window, where they could see Sheriff Hawkins riding up with a man. Anna didn't recognize someone in official-looking clothes who carried himself with the bearing of authority. Tosa's expression grew cautious, the old wariness returning briefly to his eyes. "Stay here, he said gently, moving toward the door. "Let me speak with them first." But Anna was already following him outside, her natural curiosity overriding any adult concerns about propriety or potential danger. She'd spent too many years being shuffled between adults and hidden from important conversations to willingly exclude herself now. Sheriff Hawkins dismounted with the easy familiarity of someone who had become a regular visitor to their home. "Tosa, Anna," he said with genuine warmth. "This is Marshal Davidson from the territorial capital. He's here about the paperwork." Marshal Davidson was a man in his 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything around him with professional assessment. He looked from Tosa to Anna to the house that represented such an unprecedented arrangement, his expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Tosa," he said formally, "I've come to conduct the final interview regarding your citizenship application and Miss Anna's adoption status." Anna stepped closer to Tosa, her small hand finding his automatically. The marshal noted the gesture with interest, observing how naturally they moved together, how complete their connection seemed. "Marshal Davidson," Anna said with the polite formality Dr. Stone had taught her for dealing with important adults, "would you like to see my house? Papa built it for us, and I helped with the painting." The invitation was so innocent, so filled with pride in their shared accomplishment, that the marshal found himself smiling despite his official demeanor. "I'd be honored, Miss Anna." As they toured the modest but well-built home, Anna chattered about her daily life with the unconscious ease of someone completely secure in her place in the world. She showed off her collection of Apache crafts and her English school books with equal enthusiasm, demonstrated the song Tosa had taught her about the Corn Maiden, and explained her ongoing project to teach the neighborhood children simple Apache words. "She's remarkably well-adjusted," Marshal Davidson observed quietly to Tosa, while Anna was in the other room fetching her latest school assignment to show off. "She has taught me more about living than I taught her," Tosa replied honestly. Before Anna, I believed that hatred was stronger than love, that the divisions between peoples could never be bridged. She showed me that I was wrong. Marshal Davidson pulled out his paperwork, but his official questions had already been answered by what he'd observed. The bond between Tosa and Anna was obviously genuine. Their home was stable and loving, and the community's acceptance of their unusual family was evident in the gifts that decorated their shelves and the well-worn path to their door. The territorial government has decided to approve both applications, he announced formally. "Mr. Tosa, you are hereby granted full citizenship in the United States, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. Miss Anna, your adoption is legally recognized, making you Anna McCready Tosa, daughter of Tosa, citizen of the territory." Anna clapped her hands together with delight, then threw herself into Tosa's arms with the explosive joy of someone who had just received confirmation of what her heart had known for months. "I'm really your daughter now, forever and always." "You were always my daughter," Tosa murmured against her hair. "The papers just help other people understand what we already knew." As Marshal Davidson prepared to leave, Anna ran to her room and returned with something wrapped in soft cloth. She presented it to the marshal with the ceremonial seriousness she brought to all gift-giving occasions. "This is for you," she said, "to remember that families can be made from love, not just blood." Inside the cloth was one of Tosa's carved stone figures, a small family group that showed two figures, one tall and one small, holding hands. The craftsmanship was exquisite, but the emotion it conveyed was even more valuable. "Thank you, Anna," Marshal Davidson said, his professional composure cracking slightly. "I'll treasure this." As evening settled over Willow Creek, Anna and Tosa sat on their front porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear sky. The promised stone Anna had given him that first terrifying day sat on the windowsill, catching the last light of sunset. Her wooden doll Hope had been returned to her place of honor on Anna's bed, having fulfilled her mission of keeping faith alive during the darkest hours. "Papa," Anna said sleepily, leaning against Tosa's side, "do you think other people will learn to be family like we did?" Tosa looked out at the town where Apache visitors now came for trade and conversation, where children of both cultures played together in the streets, where Dr. Stone was teaching basic Apache phrases to anyone interested in learning. The transformation hadn't been complete or without setbacks, but it had been real. "Yeshi," he said quietly, "I think love finds a way, especially when it has teachers as wise as you." Anna smiled and closed her eyes, completely secure in the knowledge that she was home, that she belonged, that her papa would be there when she woke up. Above them, the stars shone down on a small house where the impossible had become everyday reality, where hatred had been transformed into love, and where a condemned Apache warrior and an orphaned white child had proven that family was not about blood or race or the accidents of birth, but about the choice to love unconditionally and the courage to hope when hope seemed foolish. The promise stone continued to catch the starlight, a small reminder that some promises once made with pure hearts have the power to change the world.